vision for Park City. If you can wave a magic wand and show us what Park City is going to look like 5 or 10 years in the future, what do we see?
So my vision for this future is your vision. It's the vision that we all shared in our process of our vision meeting in 2009. And that vision is that we want to keep Park City, Park City. And that does relate to the 4 things that I just articulated in my introduction. And so we're going to move through this evolution of change, and we're going to have to keep our eye on those goals as a foundation for the decisions that we make from this point on. And so it's as simple as that. For the next 5 or 10 years, we know we're going to see significant growth. That's inevitable. But progress is not. And so it takes someone with that skill set and ability to help us navigate through that process. I hope that answers that, Glenn. Maybe shorter than what you wanted.
That's fine. And Andy, same question.
Can everybody hear me okay? I'm going to stay seated because for the only time tonight I'm going to read something to you. And what I'm going to read to you is what I wrote down about 2.5, 3 years ago when I was contemplating running for city council. I was wondering if I was really qualified and if I had a vision for this town, so I put pen to paper and wrote some of this down. And it's a 20-year vision. I think 5 years it's hard to have a vision, that's more of a plan. But here goes. 20 years from now, I envision a Park City that looks and feels much like the town we enjoy today. It still feels like a small mountain town, and it still takes an hour to go shopping at the local grocery, which we'll likely still be calling Albertsons. However, we will have strengthened our foundations. The resort economy will be robust and extend deep into the shoulder seasons with outstanding recreation, events, and cultural attractions. We will leverage our high quality of life to attract tech companies, a small college, and to become a premier destination for high-altitude sports training. The historic district will remain our heart and soul and will thrive off the destination businesses, but will also draw locals to enjoy its music, food, and to encourage their friends in its gathering spaces. Bonanza Park will act as the city hub for transportation, support commercial, and serve as home to many residents. A transportation grid of rail, gondola, electric buses, and maybe new technologies will connect each district and ultimately connect to the airport via light rail. Our neighborhoods will be safe and surrounded by open space and trails, and every garage will be a trailhead, and the city will be our playground. Park City Mountain Resort will have redeveloped its base into a vibrant center, and Deer Valley will continue to dominate as the country's #1 ski area. All 3 resorts will be connected, creating the largest interconnect on the continent. Moreover, they will all be tied to the city core. Our power will come from the sun, wind, and/or hydrogen, and much of our food will be grown locally. Our clear water will be used very wisely. We will be preparing for the 2034 Winter Olympic Games. And Park City will be a leader in civic sustainability, serving as an economic, environmental, and social model for other towns. So those were my thoughts 2.5 years ago, and those remain my thoughts today.
Thank you, Andy. You get the first crack at the next question. The 2 or 3 major issues facing Park City presently and over the next 4 years, and what are your solutions?
Thanks, Glenn. I think most of the challenges in Park City over the past several decades and probably the next several decades revolve around growth and how that growth is going to impact our quality of life. We're always walking the tightrope of growing and evolving, but keeping our small town character. Specifically, I think there are a couple things we can address on our growth, and that one of them is traffic and cars, and the other one is getting our redevelopment right. I believe this town can handle more people. What it can't handle is more vehicles. Cars are the antithesis of community. They put people in metal boxes, they separate them, they cause congestion, they cause pollution, and they keep us apart. So we need to solve that. We need to build a town that is more pedestrian, and we need to connect that town. I think we've also grown internally as much as we can. There's been, at this point, infill and redevelopment is what's left. And that's something I think we're going to talk about specifically tonight, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But it's something that it's very important we get right. As we take some of these underutilized districts and rebuild them, we want them to look like the community of our future. Our second issue is one that we can do very little about right now, but watch and hope, and that's the dispute between Park City and Vail. We all have friends in this, we have opinions in this, and it's something that could really impact how our town looks. Vail coming to town, they bring a whole new customer, they bring a level of professionalism, there are a lot of good things they bring. However, this lawsuit puts a cloud over our town right now. We don't know what the resorts are going to look like in the next couple of years, and there's not a lot we can do about it. It's a private dispute. They don't want our involvement. It's on private land. And so we need to sit by and watch, but we're prepared. As a city, we're figuring out different scenarios, and if this goes badly, how will we be prepared economically for it? Because it could have a big impact on our community. And then the last item is climate change. I think this is something, whether putting the politics aside and who's causing it, I think most people agree that it's real. And our seasons are changing. Our winters are getting shorter, our summers are getting longer, and we need to prepare for that. We need to build a resilient town. That town's going to have be less dependent on our resort industry. We're going to have to expand our summer element of the resorts, and we're going to have to diversify our businesses, and we're going to have to prepare for perhaps more extreme climate changes, storms and incidences. So those are the three challenges I see us facing.
Okay, Jack, you're up.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, I'll stand. That puts us closer to the same height. So the 2 to 3 major issues that we face, and I would agree that it's growth is number one. And we're looking at significant growth in parts of our community that will put pressures to transform us. And so I think the way that we deal with those growth pressures is that we look at them through that foundation of our core values that I talked about, those small town values. And that those are not negotiable items, nor should they be weighed against profit. Those are things that we have to have as an absolute. And so we're going to have to make some tough calls about that. We know that we're going to have to hold the new development that we see coming forward in the future to the values that we all share. And as we move through this process of evolving the general plan that we're involved in right now, I'm on the Planning Commission right now, and we're trying to move through this process as effectively and as efficiently as we possibly can. And I know that the goal is to be finished by the end of this year. I fear that we're rushing to the wrong solution. And I think we need to do this very carefully, because I think there are things in that general plan that make some presumptions about the way we will grow, presumptions about mass transit, presumptions about growth. My experience as a planner and someone that studied mass transit planning in graduate school, I know that those ideas are urban solutions to urban problems. And in case anybody hasn't noticed, we're not an urban environment, nor do we care to be one. So I think it's important to understand these ideas and these great ideas, some of them, about the way we knit our community together and the way we evolve. But it has to happen through a very open policy of engaging with the community in the beginning of the process, not at the end, involving the public, finding out what we want, and validating the decisions that we make as we go forward. And that's what I call planning. I also believe that creating a whole community is essential. Because if we look at the statistics of our town, we've seen things kind of get flipped upside down. We used to be a town of approximately 75% full-time residents. I don't know those figures exactly, but the bigger portion, full-time residents. And then the smaller portion, somewhere 25 to 30%, were second homeowners. Well, in 10 years, that equation's flipped. We now are predominantly a second home community, and our population hasn't changed that much. And our permanent residents have dropped way down. With that process, we've also seen our children move out of town, and some of the seniors move out of town. So we're beginning to create a stratification in our town that is thin. And it's the upper middle class to upper class. And that's happened through some decisions that I thought were mistakes. I supported the notion that we eliminate the possibility of nightly rentals in some parts of our community. And unfortunately, that was overturned by the city council. And so that eliminated a section of people that could live in our community and work in our community. And those are the things, those little things that add up to the big factors that are important as we move forward in the process of government. Thank you.
How will Treasurer Hillman Bonanza Park affect Park City?
Well, let me rip into this one. I mean, both Andy and I sit on boards, and both these projects have applications before our government. And I've talked to the legal department to make sure I'm on sound footing with regard to questions of this regard. And I think it's inappropriate for me to speak out and or jump to conclusions about any solution with regard to those two major projects that could dramatically affect the look and the character and the direction of our community. So with regard to those, I'm going to skate. I can talk a little bit about transfer development rights, TDRs as they're called. And I'll try not to speak in acronyms because I can't stand that. You know, we always do that, and it kind of leaves not just me in the dust, but about half the room. So transfer development rights have to do with, they're a tool for bringing density from undesirable places in our community to places that are maybe more appropriate for density. And I think it's a game that needs to be very carefully discussed and analyzed. And I don't think it's the city's business to get into the middle of that discussion and that evolution, because if we speak out as to where TDRs go, then we affect that whole negotiation between the parties. So that's what I'm willing to say. Thank you.
All right, Andy, your turn.
I think I'm going to stand up too. Those aren't nearly as comfortable as the council chairs. I'm not going to skate on this one. Probably won't go into a lot of depth, but I'm going to talk about them one at a time. Treasure's in my backyard, so it's an item I've been watching carefully for many years. The challenge with it is it was approved back in the 80s, back when this town's issue with traffic was the fact we had none. The neighborhoods around it weren't developed, and a large project was approved on that hillside. Since then, those rights have been kept alive, and now we have a mature neighborhood, and we have a developer with rights that wants to build behind that neighborhood. And there will be heavy impacts, and there are a lot of concerns in the community, and they're legitimate concerns. However, the developers also have legal rights to build their project, and they have the approvals. So that leaves us at a difficult place in the negotiations. We've done something a little less traditional in Treasure, where council is acting as a direct negotiator on this. Instead of it going in front of Planning Commission, we pulled it up to the council level to have negotiations, and we've given up our options as an appeal board. So if there is an appeal in this, it'll go straight to the courts. What we're working on is trying to make the project more compatible with the neighborhoods, and what it's going to take to do that is a smaller project. So what I can tell you about it is we are negotiating density transfers, And we're talking about those going to places that we think are appropriate, such as commercial districts or resort centers. So we believe we are close to a conclusion on that and hope to have something perhaps even before the end of the year for the community to take a look at, and then it will go on to Planning Commission. So Bonanza Park's another big project. It's what we call a redevelopment project. And just to give you an idea of what Bonanza Park looks like, it's 99 acres. It's centered basically by Deer Valley Drive, Bonanza, Kearns, and Park Avenue. So that whole section. And currently there's about 1.2 million square feet of commercial and residential space. If that were to build out under current zoning and under its current property rights, that could be up to 5 million in commercial space. So we are very concerned to see that happen appropriately. The nice thing about redevelopment is it's kind of a do-over. You know, every 50 years or so we get to take the places in town we made mistakes and maybe make them look a lot more like we'd like them to. So in Bonanza Park, the city put together a plan which they released in January of 2002 that laid out what we're trying to accomplish. And we are trying to build a district that is going to be a locals district. And to do that, we want it to be walkable. We want to have shared open space, we want to have a mixture of businesses, and we want to have a mixture of locals residences. We don't want it to be a conference center, nightly rentals, those sort of things. We don't want it to be resort-based. We want it to be a place where we can keep the support businesses in town, the locksmiths, the sign shops, the copy shops. We want to have spaces where new businesses can incubate. And we also, as far as the inventory, we think there's a real need in town for starter condominiums, for new families, and also empty nester condos where people can retire to when they want to downsize. So we're working to zone it properly that we can do those. And I think there's been a little confusion in that I've heard a lot lately that the council and the planning commission at times want to urbanize the town. And that's not true. Nobody wants to see this town urban. What we do sometimes is pull what we call new urban principles. And those principles are to make areas very walkable, to make them mixed use, and to stack them. Those aren't really new principles. Those are old world principles. That's what we see in most of the European cities and towns, and they're well proven. And that's what we're working for in Bonanza Park.
Thank you, Amy. You get the lead off on the next question. What is the future of affordable housing in Park City?
One of your favorite questions, Glenn.
One of my favorites.
Whew. This is a tough one because we face a paradox in this community. The better place we build in town, the harder it becomes for people to live where they work, to live in town. What we call the real people living here. Which I think shorts, we have an awful lot of people that retired here or second homeowners that are real people too. But as far as being able to live where you work, the nicer we make it, the harder it gets. Affordable housing is something the city has had a long-standing commitment to, and I think we do a decent job of. It is difficult, and what we've learned is we really don't have the land to do everything we want. We had the consultant come in about a month ago when he talked to us and threw out some provocative statements. He said, well, if you're really committed to this, you can build on the golf courses, or you can rezone your estate properties. So that isn't really an option for us, but what he was trying to illustrate is you don't have the land to do what you want. One good piece of news that came out of that is he pointed out that we do an exceptional job of low-income rental housing. We do a good job of housing our workforce right in place here. And that's something we're proud of. What he pointed out though is we don't have a lot of places for middle-income families, starter families that want yards. And some of that we're not going to be able to accomplish. We've done some great projects. You look at Snow Creek, we put in some nice units. Habitat for Humanity has done some great things up on Marsac recently, and we hope as a city to continue to facilitate those projects and push them forward. One thing that I think has become clear though is this isn't just an affordable housing project, it's a regional issue. And some of this comes down to transportation, because a lot of those homes that we don't have here, they have in the basin. So if we can enhance our transit between those places, we improve the quality of life for our workforce that does want to live nearby in the basin. So I think that's an area to pursue, and I think with affordable housing, it's something we continue to work hard at, we continue to make a priority. I'm not sure we're ever going to solve it.
Thank you, Andy. Jack?
I talked a little earlier about making us a complete community. And I think it's essential that our affordable housing or our workforce housing be in this community. And I see that the new development that can happen in certain commercial areas that are large and can see some growth and evolution in certain neighborhoods that are very close to where we've been talking about could certainly have additional density because of the affordable housing component. I'm not saying that the city pays for it, but I think that we could consider giving more height or more density in those commercial neighborhoods, those mixed-use neighborhoods, to create that component. I would disagree that having that component outside of our community is a practical idea, and relying on transportation to bring them in is a good idea. Again, I've studied mass transit. I know once you build mass transit, it doesn't simplify traffic. When they built the Bay Area Rapid Transit and they went underneath the bay to Oakland, they had this notion that they could reduce the traffic on the Bay Bridge. And essentially what happened, the day after they opened the BART system, traffic increased at a faster rate. And it typically does that because it's an urban solution for an urban problem. So if we can build affordable housing, workforce housing in our community for the people that help build our community in our town, then we won't be adding traffic to the outskirts and creating more congestion. One of the things that people said in the 2009 visioning was that the thing that would make them leave is more traffic and more congestion. So it's important that we understand that, and it's also important that we understand that residential component, that part that makes us a whole community, needs to be here. And so I think it's one of the few incentives that we should give for additional height or density in some of the commercial zones. And I will say that that height and density should be somewhere in the realm of 4 stories or lower. You know, we've seen concepts from some of the consultants, and every one of them has said to me, they don't have a problem with 8 or 10 stories. And they've said that in our planning commission meetings. And I said that I hope you have a police escort getting out of the room after we leave, because I don't think that that's what people in our community want. I'm always amused when somebody from Dallas or the East Coast thinks that it's all right to have more height, more density. And so I think that the transportation systems that we talk about make us more urban, they bring more growth, more density. I lived here long enough ago to remember 2 lanes coming into town and 1 traffic light. And I used to get frustrated because it took me 15 to 20 minutes to drive from my home to Kimball's Junction. Let's say 20 minutes. And now we added 4 lanes. We're talking about even more lanes, and there are more traffic lights. And the progress that we've made, that it now takes me 25 minutes on a busy day to get from my house to Kimball's Junction. So we have to ask, is more better, or is more just more? Thank you.
What will or should our transportation system look like in the future? Include some comments on possible multi-county and multi-canyon transportation planning.
Well, it's sounding like all these things blend together, and it's because they do. Because the parts all connect. All of these discussions, all of these questions that we're looking at this evening, they all relate to each other. And so the notion of connecting some high-tech mass transit system to the other canyons, again, changed the character of our community and the uniqueness of our community. So Park City has a special uniqueness that isn't in the county, and it isn't in the Cottonwood Canyons, and it isn't in Salt Lake City. And so while it's important to have this positive relationship with the county and the other agencies and be able to work with them and interact with them and realize that we have an effect on them and that we have a relationship with them in terms of some of the overlapping services and infrastructure that we deal with, it's important to respect that we have a difference. And so just blending ourselves out to that aspect of it is what I believe mass transit systems do. And connecting to the canyons, while I support the idea of the 30-year-old idea of skiing over the mountain to the Cottonwood Canyons, much like I did in 1958 without a lift, I think that that's a reasonable idea. But I think we have to very carefully move through a process that involves the public in the beginning of that discussion and understand the consequences and the unanticipated consequences, because we need to know what that possible outcome could be 20 years that maybe we weren't thinking about right now. So it's like following the weak branch of a tree, some ideas. If your branch isn't strong, you're going to find yourself out on a limb of maybe a branch that isn't so stable. And so we need to make sure that our initial concepts and ideas are founded in sound logic and reason. And that's what I believe I bring to the table of this job. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of folks ask what Jack and I differ on, and I think this is one area in particular where we have very different opinions. We can look back nostalgically at what town used to look like. When I got here, there were 3 traffic lights. There weren't cows on the roads anymore. But we're not there anymore. A lot of change has happened in this community. We've evolved, and good things have come with that, and bad things have come with that. But that's not going to go away. What we have done is we've surrounded our town with some great open space. We've focused very hard on preserving our historic character and our ridge lines. And we're trying to protect what we can, but we're going to have to evolve how we function as a community. Otherwise, we're going to end up with that traffic and congestion that people say they're going to leave over. And I think in order to do that, we are going to have to look at creative solutions, and we're going to have to look at transit. And I don't believe transit necessarily fuels growth. I think it can build a better community, and I think there are examples all over the world of that. Now, talk a little bit about what I think we could potentially do here. We've done a great job in recent years of focusing on walkability, bikeability, and ways to move people around town, and trails. And these are things I think we need to continue to make a priority and focus on, and find ways to get people to move around as pedestrians or as bikers. But then moving out from that, I think we need to continue to beef up our transit system and start looking at new solutions. New technologies will come on board, whether they're some sort of electric buses, personal pods, ways to move people around. Those are going to get people around town. And then I think we need to connect to our resorts. Both Park City and Deer Valley, I would love to see those resorts connect back to town with better skier enhancements, gondolas, funiculars, or some other way to get people back and forth that doesn't involve shuttles. I also think it's time to connect our 3 resorts. That's something that is going to allow people to move around town not needing vehicles. It's also going to do a tremendous thing for our economy. It will make us a destination and unique in the U.S. And then I believe the last component is what's being worked on in the Wasatch Summit. That's a regional group that's been put together to deal with a comprehensive plan for the Wasatch. What you hear about is transportation, but it's also dealing with ski area expansion, water, and wilderness, trying to get all these interest groups together to figure out a way to address that. And they're looking at plans on how we can bring mass transit up from the airport, up the Cottonwood Canyons, and potentially through to Park City. What you hear about a lot is light rail. That could be a likely outcome. There could also be rapid bus, which is a wheeled version of a train essentially, or there could be some other creative solutions. But what they're looking at is ways to move people around that don't require cars. And I think we can't ignore the fact that there are going to be tremendous growth pressures on us, and we need to address them somehow.
environmental issue. What's the future water supply demand scenario for Park City, and what are the solutions for meeting the demand?
Well, it's looking a lot better as of the last couple of months. For 20 plus years, we've been working on a regional water deal, getting all the water providers together and finding a way that we can share resources. The challenge for Park City, well, the first challenge is we're a high desert. We've had a couple of dry years, but the water all falls in the mountains here and it runs downstream and eventually ends up in reservoirs far below us. We have to turn around and we have to pump that. And that uses a tremendous amount of energy. We also get a lot of our water out of tunnels here, and those have mining legacy issues that we need to treat that water, and they also have real concerns in terms of collapses. Right now, we've gone down from about 60 to somewhere in the 40% of our water comes out of those tunnels, but should there be some event that those tunnels collapse, they can be problematic. And that's where the regional water deal comes in as important. What we've done is now we have a reciprocal agreement with all these parties to pump in this water, so we have that redundancy. And what that redundancy is eliminated is something that's been very controversial, which is the reservoir we've talked about. That is now a dead issue for this community, at least for the foreseeable future, because we will be bringing our water in from Rockport, the Jordanelle, and other areas. We will not need to host it locally, which is good. That was a very controversial issue because there's obvious conservation easements, deed restrictions, all kinds of reasons we shouldn't do that. So at this point, I think we have satisfied our immediate water need, and I think our next conversation should be on conservation. As a town, we don't do a very good job of our water conservation, and we need to improve how we handle things and start to reduce our needs so we don't have future demands that exceed what we've just been able to accommodate.
I think that was a very good answer, and I totally agree with it. And this could be a very short answer. I mean, I do think that we've done some great things in our community over the last 20 years to improve the supply side of this equation. But being a geographer and planner, and knowing what the dry aspect of our community is, and the whims of the weather that come our way, and the fact that I totally acknowledge in global warming, and it's a reality. Maybe that message should get out to the rest of the state. But we need to conserve. And if you drive around Park Avenue and Kearns Boulevard, you see large areas of grass around commercial buildings that are huge and substantial. So I think we need to encourage and empower the rest of our community to be responsible about xeriscaping. I think the city's done a good job. They have a great department, some great people working in the city. But I think we need to stretch that out to make the rest of our community feel that sense of responsibility to really engage in that, because we just can't waste it. And I'm sure that the additional water will help us grow to be a larger community. And I think that it was necessary that we made those steps and measures, because water is an issue. Clean air, clean water, clean ground are absolutes. They're must-haves. And it's a challenge in a mining community, because if you look back at the old photos like I've been looking lately, and you look at the pollution over the community, and realize that they had raw sewage running down the drains 50 years ago, you realize that we've done a lot to improve that scenario. But we need to take it a step further, and we need to really walk that walk of conservation. Thank you.